Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me just say that we get it. Personal development can be hard, but you don't have to do it alone. Project Endure has been on a mission to create a supportive and inspiring community of people, all striving to be better together. Head down to the link in the show notes and join the Hard Things Club so that we can do hard things together. And if you're already a member, invite a friend and spread the love. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 133. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very, very special guest in Monmouth County, New Jersey, Nick Mullery. Nick, how are you, man?
I'm great, Joe. Thank you, of course, for having me. I'm super excited anytime I get an opportunity to spend some time with you and chat. So, really looking forward to this one.
The feeling is mutual. And I was mentioning to you before we hit record that I know you, we know each other, we've connected, communicated, but I don't know a whole lot of your story. And I especially don't know the depth of your story. And
Mhm.
so I'm really looking forward to digging into that. But before we do any digging, if you
Mhm.
had to introduce yourself to the audience for those who don't know you, how
Yeah.
would you do that?
My name is Nick Mullery. I'm a physical therapist. I own my own business, and that's kind of been the big thing for me in the last couple of years, in terms of like where I spend a lot of my energy. But I'm also a lifelong athlete that has recently been pretty deep into the running community. So that has been something that's taken up a lot of my past about year and a half. That's pretty much where I'm at now. You can either find me in my office working or in the trails or on the road running.
Yeah. Now, what got you interested in physical therapy to begin with?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's not like a great story. The unique part about it is that I knew from like a very young age, actually, like 15 years old, that I wanted to be a physical therapist. And I think just like in general, people don't know what they want to do into their 20s, 30s, even later than that, too. So for me, it's something that I kind of, as soon as it was brought to my attention at an early age, I was like, wow, I can see myself doing that. And I really never wavered on that. Like I've been steadfast in, pursuing that as a career from the very beginning.
So, as someone who is also a physical therapist and has chosen not to be in the clinic full time, you know, I've seen both ends of the spectrum. You have people who are in the profession and really have problems with almost every aspect of it. And then you have people who are in the profession who love every aspect of it. And then people like myself who are in the middle and love parts of it, but maybe want to make changes that require you to step away from the clinic full time. Where do you fall on that spectrum, being someone who owns your own business in the physical therapy space?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this because this is a topic that I could probably talk about for a very long time. I mean, there's definitely obvious flaws, not just with physical therapy, but I think as like with our healthcare system in general right now. And so there are some things in the physical therapy field that are kind of unfortunate for both the provider and the consumer of the services and of our healthcare system. Those kinds of things are what led me to want to start my own business, because I wanted to make an impact on how things were done because I truly believe that people deserve to have the highest quality of care that they could possibly have. And I wanted to eliminate any barriers to that. So that's kind of how I found myself in this situation now where I own my own business and I'm able to do things the way that I believe they should be done without anything else getting in the way of that.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll talk more about the business side of things as this conversation unfolds. And
Mhm.
so the other thing you mentioned was that you're a runner and that you live in that world as well.
Yeah.
When did that start for you?
Yeah, that's interesting too. So like I mentioned, was always kind of just like a field athlete, played lacrosse in college. Um, and I just knew that I wanted to stay active post college, post playing days, that kind of thing. I was more so into like weightlifting and CrossFit initially. So I found myself doing that for a good amount of time. And I was like really happy to be done with running because coming from sports, running is usually like, a punishment for when you did something wrong, or like the shitty days that you have to get through to, actually start the season to like ramp up into shape. But about like a year and a half ago, I did my first Spartan race. And preparing for that, I was like, oh, I think I have to like run, like it's a race. And it turns out that it's just like a lot of hiking and climbing up mountains and really not that much running. But I think that's kind of what got me into the love of trail running. So then I found the trails, and I really started to enjoy that side of running where I'm, in the woods, in nature, don't always feel the pressure to like have to run all the time. Like I walk around and just like take in the scenery and then kind of just run when I feel like it.
Mm. What's the best run you've ever been on?
Oh, that's a great question. I can't say that there's one particular run, but any my favorite place to run is Hartshorn Woods, in Highlands, New Jersey. It's like 10 minutes from my house. So that's where I do spend a lot of my time running. And just every part of that park is gorgeous and I can like get lost in there for hours and I do sometimes.
Actually lost or just lost on
Uh,
purpose?
I have been lost, but if that happens enough, you kind of get to know your way around. So yeah, I can find my way out from anywhere in there now, I think.
There's such a beautiful life lesson buried in there. If you get lost enough, eventually you can find your way out of anywhere.
Yeah.
And, like, if we're comparing the woods or the trees and those trails to life, life can seem a lot bigger and maybe more complex and more complicated, but I think the principle applies, and you have to go down those paths to get lost the first time so that you can
Mhm.
explore and find your way out, and I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first time I was lost in there, I like panicked and I was like pulling up my phone to like GPS myself out of it, like where's the closest street. And now, as I went on, get more lost and just realize that if you just keep moving, keep going, you'll find a familiar place and find your way back.
Yeah. So, with that being said, Nick, I wanna ask you the first big question of this podcast.
Yeah.
And when you look back at your life so far to this point, what's the
Mm.
hardest thing or circumstance that you've ever had to handle that you did not get to choose for yourself?
Yeah. I mean, this is a difficult question for me to answer because I truly feel like I'm someone who's very lucky, very blessed. Like I've had a great life. So answering this question is hard because I don't want to come across as like this is something that I'm complaining about because I'm very grateful for everything that I have. But this year I did have a tough life circumstance that um, it was just something that was difficult in the moment to navigate mentally and emotionally. And that was infertility with me and my wife trying to have our first kid. So we got the help that we needed for that. We ended up doing IVF. It was successful. Again, super lucky, super blessed. She's due in January, so we're like super excited right now. I'm really looking forward to being a dad and starting like a new challenge in my life. But going through that process for those couple months was pretty tough at times.
That is right around the corner, and that is amazing.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you, appreciate it.
So if we rewind to when you and your wife decided that you wanted to enter this next chapter and
Mm.
you first realized that you were not not on the path that you thought you needed to be on. Things weren't working the way you thought they would be working. What were
Mhm.
some of the emotions that hit you, if you can remember back?
Yeah, I mean, I think I went through, like, all of the steps of like grieving. Like at first it was denial. I was like, no, that's fine. We just got to keep trying, just trying to stay positive and things like that. And then you become frustrated at times and angry, kind of like the why me kind of thing, right? So there was a lot of ups and downs, but really through like the thick of it, just trying to like stay positive for the both of us, like me and my wife, Sarah. Because there are times where you don't have trust that things are going to work out your way because everything leading up to that moment kind of hasn't gone your way. So it's hard to stay positive. But yeah, I mean, the emotions are kind of all over, but eventually when, things become a success and you start gearing up now, in our case for parenthood, there's like no better feeling to be on the other side of it and be like, wow, it was all worth it.
In those moments where maybe there wasn't a light at the end of the tunnel and you weren't sure if it was ever gonna work out, how did you keep yourself from feeling defeated to the point of not wanting to try anymore?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is for me at least was knowing that we weren't alone. Um, there are obviously like a ton of other couples that go through this too, and some of them I know people who have gone through the same thing, and there's TikTok and Instagram worlds that have that kind of community too. So just like hearing other people's stories and seeing the successes that are out there, helps you kind of keep hope.
Mm. And now as you look forward to parenthood, and this is coming from someone who is looking forward to someday being a parent, being a father, what excites you the most and what scares you the most?
Yeah. What excites me the most is just like holding this child. So we don't know if we're having a boy or girl. It's going to be a surprise. So just like that first moment of like holding them and looking at them is like what I'm just looking forward to the most right now. And then the scariest part is probably like the next couple days after that, like trying to figure everything out from ground zero and like having obviously no experience with it. I know it's going to be like a whirlwind and there's no way to actually prepare for it, but yeah, just like getting through those first couple days, I think, until it's finally just a routine.
Mm. Is there one trait that you hope your child gets from you and one trait you hope that your child gets from your wife?
Haven't thought about that, but off the top of my head, I do hope that I can pass along my positivity. I do think that even at times when I'm not 100% sure that what I'm saying is going to work out, I do tend to be vocally positive, and I think that just that helps everybody else around me feel better. And that's one thing that I hope I pass along. And then in terms of my wife, obviously there's so many things that I it is hard to choose one. It is hard to choose one, but I would say her sense of humor, just the way that she can laugh at things and the way that she can make people laugh is amazing. So I hope that gets passed along as well.
That was an amazing answer. I hope she's listening to this.
I hope
Uh,
she listens to this.
so I'm not gonna have you throw your wife under the bus, but if there's one trait that you hope your child doesn't get from
Yeah.
you, what would that trait be?
Um, I mean, this is inevitable in some circumstances. So I don't know how I really want to word this, but like I guess having fear to do the things that they want to do. Um, I think that that's something that I've gotten a lot better with as I've actually matured into an adult. But like as a kid, um, teenager, little kid, I was like pretty scared of things and like just an anxious kid. And I think that that kind of stunted my potential in those years. Um, Again, just like how lucky I was. Like I was like school came pretty natural to me. So like I would get good grades in school. I was a pretty good natural athlete. So like I never had to like put in a whole lot of work for a long period of time as a kid. And anything that looked like it would be extra effort, I just got scared away from. Um, so I hope that my child from an early age learns how to not be afraid of things and just kind of attack them head on. And even if failure is the outcome, there's always a million lessons to be learned from it, right?
So good.
Yeah.
So that transitions well into the next question, which is when you do look back at the things you did attack, even if there was fear present, what's the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose and why did you do that thing?
Yeah. Um, the biggest one is definitely, we talked about it already, but choosing to leave the security of a job that, I went to school for 7 years of college for, to earn a degree, to get hired by somebody to have a comfortable job, and choosing to leave that to pursue something that was just more fulfilling to me. um, it you know I know you can relate to this, but just the unknowing of it all, and like the realization that um you have to just find a way to get things done from now on and nobody's going to bail you out, is super scary and really hard to do at times. And I feel like now, after about 2 years, 2 full years of doing it, I'm like just finally starting to like feel a little bit more comfortable and safe. But I don't think that you really ever lose that, um, that fear or that uncomfortable feeling, um, from leaving what you know.
Mm-mm. Uh, there's an opportunity for a vulnerable moment here, and I'll share this at some point in the conversation, but I actually have a journal entry pulled up on my computer because I was just sharing it with somebody else. And so I'll share it in a little while when the time is right. But you're so right. You're spot on. That feeling, that fear, I don't think ever goes away entirely, but
Mm,
you learn how to manage it, and when it does pop up, you learn how to continue moving forward even when it is present.
yeah,
And so I'm curious for you, what were some of the scarier moments, since leaving that security and starting this business?
yeah. I mean, just like the initial first weeks of like something new, um, not being in an environment that I'm used to, I was kind of just like, boom, we're starting. It's day one. Act like you've been here before. Trying to just like fake it till you make it, almost, in a way. Um, and then, obviously, it's up to me to earn a paycheck. So those moments where you're like, I don't really know if I'm going to be able to cover some of the bills I have coming in, is super scary too. But again, just I'm so fortunate that that has never really been a real scare. It's been a quick scare, but have always been able to at least cover what I need to cover. Keep a roof over my head, keep food on the table, that kind of stuff. So, but those moments are always terrifying.
Yeah, they're very terrifying.
Yeah.
And there was this video I watched with Bedros Keuilian, who, if anybody out there is listening and knows who he is, understands what he's about. He's an entrepreneur, and he was talking about, any winner or anybody who is successful in anything that they do likely feels like they are losing or just treading water or just
Mm,
barely hanging on most of the time, and then
mm,
they get these glimpses of, yes, this is working. Yes, I'm succeeding. Yes, I'm on the right path. And they stack that feeling over and over and over again, even though most of the time they are not feeling like that. And I think as human beings, we tend to ignore the fact that other people feel anxious, that other people are afraid, that other people struggle. And we tend to believe that we are the only ones going through that and that everybody else has it figured out, when the truth is everybody feels those things. And even the most successful people that you watch through social media or that you know in person, they also deal with those things. And the way they carry themselves through that might be very different from how you carry yourself through it, but it doesn't mean that they're not experiencing it. Would you agree with that?
100%, yeah, and I think the more like, now as I'm, getting older, doing more adult things and, like, going into, some, like, unknown areas of my life, I 100% agree, and I think that once you realize that that discomfort and that fear doesn't really ever truly leave, because there's always a next thing that's going to make you uncomfortable and make you a little bit fearful, whatever it is. Like right now for me it's becoming a dad, but once you realize that you can take that as a motivation, to prepare yourself and to truly just do anything to figure it out and get the job done, I think that ends up leading to a lot of confidence. And like you said, kind of just stacking those repeatedly is almost like a snowball going downhill, right? Like you just gain momentum, one thing after another, and it doesn't get easier, but you become more confident with those things.
I couldn't agree more with that.
Mhm.
There's this quote from Jocko Willink that I'll read and then we'll talk about it. But he said, most of us aren't defeated in one decisive battle. We are defeated one tiny, seemingly insignificant surrender at a time that chips away at who we should really be.
Mhm.
And I think in the world of business and entrepreneurship and in life, we have those decisions where we can choose to stand back up and fight again and keep moving forward, or we can throw up our hands and say, this is too hard. I want comfort. I want the easy way. And every choice is changing who we become. And I'm curious for you when it comes to business, how have you grown as a person through business? What does that growth look like? Because that's the growth that I love for myself.
Yeah. I think personally the biggest thing is just like, um, moving forward, like you kind of just said with that Jocko quote, just like moving forward, knowing that things aren't going to be perfect, and being accepting of that, like just knowing that it doesn't have to be perfect to get done. Um, and eventually over time those things will evolve and adapt into maybe what you think is perfect, but just like doing the next thing and checking it off your list is sometimes better than sitting around and waiting for like a perfect time or the thing to be completed at 100%.
I would agree with that. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I'll read the section from my journal that I was alluding to earlier, and then I will see where it takes us. But this is 2.5 years into business, 2.5 years into Project Endure. And to preface all of this, I went through seasons in the beginning of business where just, sleepless nights, you wake up in the morning with a huge pit in your stomach. You walk around with just tightness in your chest all the time because it's all very new and it's all very hard. And I got through that initial season, and the past year has been great. I haven't felt like that. I haven't thought like that for a while. And all of a sudden, about a week ago, kind of hit me. Had a tough week, had a couple tough days. And so this is what I wrote. The old adage is true. When it rains, it pours. I feel as if it's pouring and I'm not carrying an umbrella. In this case, the rain doesn't make me wet. It just makes me sad. It feels like a wave of heaviness just wrapped around me, making it hard to expand the lungs and find a deep breath. My face feels as if it forgot how to form a smile, and my mind is in survival mode. I know that this is an overreaction and an attempt to overcorrect to the apparent danger that I'm feeling, that I don't want to experience. That is the danger of not enough. This scares me. The thought of not enough terrifies me. I want enough resources. I want enough business. I want to be enough. And I don't even know what enough is. I need to stop taking things for granted and confusing what is appealing in this moment, what is actually important. And there's more, but the point is like that I wrote that like a week and a half ago, and I felt that, right? And
Yeah.
And I don't think that most people would look at me and think that I feel that. And
Mhm.
so I'm wondering if you've had moments like that, maybe different words, but similar feelings in your business journey.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, just one of the places that my mind took me listening to that is just the fact that, things, although you want to have like the Goggins mindset and be like, you know, always work hard, always push forward, don't make excuses. At a certain point, you have to be okay with like your vulnerable moments too and appreciate them just as much as you would like the moments where you're thriving and everything is going good and you
Mm.
seem like there's no worries and things are clicking. Um, and just recognize that as like a normal human response to anything or maybe nothing. We just because we want to strive to be the best us that we can be and have enough to put it in your words, doesn't mean that we're gonna just like stop having normal human emotions too. So I think just recognizing that and being okay with that is really big, and to take a step back and just still be grateful for the things that are really important to you.
Yeah. And I would also say, to tie this all back in to the topic of action, that we should embrace emotions. We should feel the things that we're feeling. We shouldn't suppress that. And at the same time, we shouldn't let those feelings control our actions. We should do the things we said we were going to do. We should keep the commitments that we made, even if we no longer feel like it in that moment. So it's this two-sided coin where you should feel those things, but you shouldn't let those feelings dictate your
Mhm.
decisions. And so I think that's one of the things, one of the skills that entrepreneurship has been helping me get better at. But
Mhm.
it's definitely not easy.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's a job to do, right? And you can't just like give up when you're in a bad mood one day. But I definitely, because I feel that way too. Like when things aren't going well, I still have to show up for the people that are counting on me. But yeah, I definitely think it's like okay to feel small sometimes, and just acknowledge that as a normal response to life.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate this part of our conversation. And before we keep moving on, I do want to pose that same question again. What is the hardest thing you've ever done on purpose? But this time aimed at running in specific. Is there a
Mhm.
hardest run, race, endeavor that you've pursued
Yeah.
in that world?
Yeah, yeah. So this year I ran my first marathon in April, um, and that was like way harder than I thought it was going to be. I was, I was like, I thought I was prepared, and I was like, wow, 26 miles is a long time. And then in August of this year, I did an ultra marathon. Well, I attempted one. I didn't finish, but that was again just kind of on like a whole other level, not just physically but like actually emotionally too, when you're doing something physical for that long of a time, your emotions do kind of go a little crazy on you sometimes. So that was, both of those things were very difficult physically. I actually honestly would say maybe even just like the marathon was more difficult physically, just with like the pain that was involved. But the ultra was like mentally a little bit more draining.
So if we focus in on the ultra, give us some details. What was the distance? Tell us about the race and where did it begin to get hard?
Yeah, it was a 100K race, so it was 62 miles. It was a trail race. It was about 12,000 feet of elevation gain, so some pretty hefty climbing. Um, at about mile 28 or so, 30 maybe, um, I got off trail, which wasn't uncommon for this race. Just talking to some of the other racers and people that I was moving with at certain periods of time. Um, Hard to follow markings, off trail, turn around, get back on trail, keep going. At this particular time around mile 28, I got back on the trail after being off. and I actually went the wrong direction. And this race was a looped format, and each loop you would go counterclockwise, or basically the opposite way that you came. So seeing people passing you in the opposite direction wasn't uncommon, especially like at this stage of the race. So me going in the opposite direction, seeing people coming the other way wasn't like alarming to me until I thought I was approaching an aid station and I wasn't. And I asked somebody, like, "Oh, how much further until the aid station?" And they were like, there's no aid station this way. It's like 5 miles up that way, like where you're coming from." And I was like, "Oh shit!" And at this point, basically finished all my fuel, water, electrolytes. Didn't really have much on me, and just felt like morally defeated at this point. It felt like my race was over, um, and I mentally gave up at that point, even though I was still on the course. When I finally did make it back to that aid station, that was kind of like the start finish, where like my crew was, my wife was, some friends, and I told them what happened, and I was like, "That's it. I'm not going to hit the cutoffs for the next couple miles. I'm just like mentally checked out. I didn't do what I came here to do. Let's go home." And every single one of them was like, "We're not letting you do that. We're
Mm,
not letting you just leave.
mm.
You have to go back out there." And I what's funny enough is like the thing that clicked for me the most, even when they were saying this, I was still just like, no, no, no. But my wife took my socks off and put a fresh pair of socks on, and that just that alone, I was like, it clicked for me. I had to go back out there. So I did another lap. I ended up doing 50 miles on the day, but I missed the time cutoffs, just getting behind schedule and not moving as quickly as I should have. But um, having those people around me to push me through that, that third lap for me, made it feel like I won that day, even though um, I technically didn't cross the finish line.
Wow. That visual of your wife not even saying, "Go
Mhm.
back out there," but just taking the socks off and putting on a fresh pair and what that symbolized to you is so powerful.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was crazy. There was just like no hesitation from her, and after that, I was like, I can't go home from here. I have to go back out.
Mm.
So that was really cool. And like I said, that just made the whole day feel like a huge success, even if objectively looking at it, I didn't finish the race.
It's such a unique way to think in this world that you can not achieve the outcome you set out for and still walk away feeling like a success, like you
Mhm,
won.
mhm.
I would love for you to just talk a little bit more about that, what it means to you, what that might look like in other areas of life, because I agree with it. And I think the world needs more of that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many stories from that day. I was, out there on the course for 15 hours. Like there's a million things I could, take away from that day. But that is absolutely the number one thing when people ask me afterwards, like, what was your biggest takeaway from this? Like, what did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about your body? The biggest thing that I learned is that like you don't have to win to feel like a winner. And that really changed my mindset and my perspective on life in general after that, where you're right. Like the outcome that you think is important is not always what's most important. So like I really like realized I didn't care about like a medal. I didn't care about like crossing an arbitrary finish line that somebody set out for me. What I cared about was not giving up, continuing to move forward, especially when the people that I love are around me and cheering me on and expecting me to give it my 100% effort. And when I can walk away and say that I did that, and those people were proud of me, even regardless of the outcome, that was just like so huge. That was what's life changing.
Wow. You don't have to win to feel like a winner is
Mhm.
such a great line.
Yeah.
what would that look like in another area of your life, right? Where is somewhere right now that you are striving for this thing and that thing feels like it would be winning?
Mhm.
However, with this alternative perspective, you might be okay with not meeting that objective someday because you could still feel like a winner.
Yeah. I mean, first thing comes to mind is, again, like, looking at it from a business perspective. Obviously, I wanted to start a business to feel more fulfilled and feel like I'm living a life of purpose and not just like a cog in a wheel and like a chink in a chain. But um, obviously, there's financial and monetary motivation as well. And there always is, and I've talked about that already on this episode. Um, like, that is important, but I don't think it's as important as I tell myself or I think that it is in my head. Like,
Mhm.
you mentioned before, like, what's enough? Like, what's enough money? Like, you can always have more. Like, you can always make more or have more things or have a bigger house, whatever. And that, I think, is like a good motivator in a way because it's important. But I don't think that it should be your only like litmus test of if you were a success or not. And I think that's pretty cliche and most people would agree with that. But in the like, the dog days of business when you're just like, all right, how are we gonna, pay the bills again this month? We're starting over from scratch. My next paycheck isn't guaranteed. Like, it's hard not to think about it. But I think that the opportunities and the lifestyle that owning a business can offer is way more valuable than like the money that it can offer.
Mm. Yeah, to be honest, it's a conversation that I need to dig into with myself much further than I have to this point is just what is enough.
Mhm,
And, I think a business needs to have certain metrics, right? In order to stay alive, to be successful from a quote unquote business standpoint. But beyond that, at the end of our lives, what will we care about most? And
mhm,
I think most people would agree that it's not going to be money, right?
mhm,
On our deathbeds, we are likely going to care much more about the relationships that we have, the impact that we left, so on and so forth. And yet, for some reason, it can be so hard to embrace that now when it seems like we have so much time left. And when it
mhm,
seems like we will have time for those relationships and for these other things. And it's been so interesting for
mhm,
me on this podcast and outside of this podcast to have conversations with people who have seen life flash before their eyes, who have lost people that have been so close to them, who have had these traumatic experiences and walk away with this totally different perspective on life where almost nothing matters except for the fact that they get to be alive today and they get to love other people. And that's so inspiring. And so, yeah, I think that this conversation has been what I needed, and I'm sure it's been what somebody else has needed.
mhm.
And before we move on, do you have any other thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I totally agree with you, and I think one of the themes here in our conversation is that, like, I personally feel very lucky and grateful for the life that I've been given, and luckily that I haven't had to experience anything like super traumatic like that has been like just a life changing event that changes the way I look at things. But I also don't think that you need to either. Like, I think just from objectively listening to other people's stories and just like really thinking about the future and not just always being in the present, um, if you can learn to like really think about what's important and like the moments that you can't have back, I think that's super powerful. And I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to recognize and acknowledge the things that are important before I have to, you know, basically regret something.
Mm. There's an amazing quote that is from, I think, an ancient philosopher. And so I'll just read it and then I'll explain why I brought it up. but it goes, no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man. And something you said sparked this idea of like, we don't get moments twice. We don't get the same moment a second time. And it's so easy to get caught up in what's next, what's tomorrow, what do I have to do, and miss out on this thing, this gift that we only get one of every single time it happens. We only get one of them. And something you said there just grounded me in that. And I wanted to share that quote, and I couldn't agree more with you.
Yeah, 100%.
So, this is the Project Endure podcast. You're a runner. We also all need endurance for life. And I'm curious, when you hear the word endurance, Nick, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so obviously I knew this question was coming from listening to your podcast. So I did think about this one a little bit before, I came up with my answer. I think I changed my answer a couple times even, but I think a good definition for me now, like as I think about everything, is endurance means putting forward the same effort no matter how good or how bad things are going.
Can you read that again, Nick?
Endurance means putting forward the same effort no matter how good or how bad things are going.
Mm. Tell us more about what you mean by the same effort, no matter how good or how bad things are going. What does that mean to you?
So, obviously, when things are good, you might feel motivated and like you don't have to work as hard or try as hard, and you might back off a little bit. Or you might be somebody who's like, wow, what I'm doing is working. I'm going to try even harder. And then when things start going bad, you're like, oh, well, it's not working. I'm going to give up. Or when things go bad, you can be like, well, shit, I need to get my ass in gear and go. So there can be different responses to having like a positive or a negative effect based on your effort. But I think the idea of endurance is that no matter which way things are shifting, you're still putting forward the same effort. And that should be your best effort.
Mm. There was an episode of this podcast. The guest's name is Richard, and he's just a really incredible guy. It's one of the first couple episodes. Can't think of the number off the top of my head, but he runs this after school program for children, and he teaches children about grit. And one of the things that stood out to me from our conversation was that he would ask the children, what energy do you have to give today out of 10?
Mhm,
And if a child said it's a 4 out of 10 kind of day, he would say, okay, I got it. Can you just commit to giving me all four of what you have? Give me all of that four. And then the
mhm,
next kid would say, it's a 9 out of 10 day. I've got a ton of energy. I feel great. And he said, great. Give me all of that nine.
mhm,
And for a while, I actually would wake up after that episode and have a little whiteboard in my office and put what number I was out of 10 and then
mhm.
commit to giving that number, all of that number.
Yeah.
And I think you're right, right? Not letting ourselves get too high off the highs or too low from the lows,
Mhm,
and to plan the work and work the plan and give everything that we can on any given day. Even if we only have 1 out of 10, it means
mhm.
that we give the 1 out of 10. And
Yeah.
I agree that that's what endurance looks like, and it can also look like a lot of other things. I'm
Mhm.
curious your thoughts on that number exercise.
I love that. I think that's so cool. I want to start using that now too. I think that's a really cool way to look at things. And going into this podcast, you asked me a couple of my favorite quotes, and to quote to say a quote to Mr. Quote himself, I'd like to share one.
Yes.
Um, this is a John Welborn quote. I don't know if you've heard this one, but training is like moving a big pile of dirt. Some days you have a shovel, some days you have a spoon, but as long as you're moving dirt every day, you're heading towards your goal. And I think that basically summarizes the energy level question. So I love that. I think it's so cool.
That is one of my favorite quotes. And for the longest time, this was when I was thinking of leaving my job to start Project Endure. I saw that quote. I love that quote. And I was trying to think, like, can I create a piece of art? I'm not a very artistic guy. If
Mhm,
you look at the Project Endure branding, it's like words in a straight line. Like that's my level of creativity. But I was like, I want like a spoon, like I want like a giant spoon hanging on my wall to remind me, like on those days where you just have the spoon, that's what you shovel with. And I'm actually re-inspired. Like I very well might go downstairs after this podcast, take a spoon out of our drawer in the kitchen and just like tie a piece of string to it and nail it to my wall. I might do that.
I
Uh,
love it.
but with that being said, you also shared with me before the podcast through your intake form two other quotes. Do you have those handy? Because if so, I would love for you to read those. And if not,
Yeah.
I can remind you.
Yeah, I have them here actually too. The one I'm gonna read right now, I actually thought about from something else that we said today. I think it might have been the Jocko quote that you shared, and as you read that, I was like, "Oh, this quote." So this is a Lazarus Lake quote. Barclays Marathons guy, if you guys don't know, but he says, "True success is not the absence of failure; it is the refusal to surrender." So simple, but just like so profound.
I agree. And also for anybody listening, if you don't know what the Barkley Marathons are and you don't know who Lazarus Lake is, just type it into YouTube, do yourself a favor and watch it. This guy is so out there and like in the best possible way. And that race series is just wild.
Hmm. Yeah, just a brief story about that. I watched that documentary like in college. I think was the first time that I saw it, or at least one of the documentaries that's about that marathon. There's a lot now, and I was like, "What? People like do this? People run more than like a marathon?" And I just remember that like so distinct. I think I watched it like 3 days in a row actually, because I was just like so blown away. And then, obviously I didn't attempt the Barkley marathons, but just doing an ultra marathon this year and like looking back and thinking to like how I felt watching that documentary, I was like, holy crap,
Yeah.
a lot can change quickly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then you had one more quote that I'll let you read
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. It's a Thomas Edison quote. Opportunity is missed by most because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, there's not much to add to it. It's a great image and it's very true.
Mhm. Yep. Hard work works.
Amen.
Yeah.
And so, all right. So we're going to transition here in a sec to the final question of the podcast. And if you've listened to the podcast, you know that this is one of my favorite questions because everybody's struggling with something like we spoke about earlier, no matter what it looks like on the surface. We are all human and we all experience fear, anxieties, doubts, et cetera, et cetera. And so you're speaking to a bunch of individuals all over the country, all over the world who are going through their own stuff right now. And maybe there are a few people out there who are really going through it. They're lost in the woods. They feel like giving up. They just don't know where to go or what to do. If you got a chance to speak directly to them, what would you say?
Um, I would just say find someone or multiple people, a community that you feel comfortable with and that you can confide in and trust. Um, like I said, when I was going through some tough stuff this year, just knowing that there was, other people out there that went through the same thing and people that would, honestly just like listen to me if I needed to talk about something um, was really, really helpful. So, if you could find something or somebody to talk with, just go do it. If you can't think of anyone, Joe, I know you would be an ear for anybody. I would too. So if you have no other choices, choose one of us too, because I love listening and I think I'm a good listener. So if anybody does ever need anything from me or just wants to talk, I'm here.
I'll second everything you said, Nick. If you're listening to this podcast and you don't have a support system, both Nick and I would love to be there for you. And we both mean that. And with that being said, Nick, if people do want to find you, connect with you, follow along with what you're doing, where's the best place for people to do that?
Yeah, best way is Instagram and certainly open to DMs if anybody wants to reach out. My Instagram name is Dr. period Nick Mullery, Nickmullery.
Awesome. And I'll link that in the description to make it easy to access. And Nick, before we wrap things up for good here, do you have any final words?
Just so grateful for this conversation. I've been looking forward to it. Like I said when we first got on, I always appreciate talking to you, Joe. You're just one of the best guys that I know. So, thank you for inviting me on. I hope everybody enjoyed what we had to say here, and I hope everybody has a great day.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you, Nick, and very, very grateful for your friendship and just the way you show up in this world. And I know this episode, this conversation is going to impact many.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you, Joe.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.